My name is Mahmoud Fitil. I'm organizing against the carbon pipelines proposed to go across Iowa. There's now a total of 3 for Great Plains Action Society. We are in firm opposition against this. There shouldn't be pipelines on stolen land. We believe that there should be prairie instead of pipelines out here, and we'd like to see that type of carbon sequestration. Indigenous species of plants here have very intricate, deep root systems that are fully capable of sequestering plenty of carbon, in contrast to a lot of the monocropping and GMO, and causing that dead zone down in the Gulf of Mexico. We at Great Plains Action Society, as well as our coalition here, unlikely coalition between conservatives, liberals, environmentalists, Indigenous folks and others, in opposition to it because it's a greenwashed idea or solution to the climate crisis or the climate emergency that we're all facing. It takes up to 20 to 30% more energy to sequester carbon in the fashion that they're proposing. That's not a great trade-off when you're considering that we are trying to reduce carbon emissions. That's really what they're after, is carbon credits, so they can buy and sell those on a market with big-time polluters that actually got us into this mess in the first place. It's adding a lifeline to a dying fossil fuel industry that we just need to see die off totally and be done with. For over 90 years, the fossil fuel industry, and there's proof of this, has lied to the public and prevented information coming out to demonstrate the causal relationship between burning fossil fuels and climate change. We're seeing disruption of global patterns of jet streams and so on. We're seeing the Arctic glaciers are melting. This is going to spell climate catastrophe for millions and millions of people. We don't feel like perpetuating the fossil fuel industry for the few profiteers to get richer is worth everyone's sanity, well-being, and health and livelihood. The future generations are being robbed. Carbon capture and storage, or sequestration, or carbon capture and usage is really a way to prop up the fossil fuels industry. It's a way to provide a perverse incentive through government subsidies. We can't sign on to that. It's a false climate solution. It's not going to get us where we need to be. If you have somebody who's got a drinking problem or a drug problem, what they need to do is they need to stop. We have a fossil fuel problem. We don't need to find clever ways to use technology to suck carbon out of the air, or capture it at smokestacks on coal plants, or capture it at ethanol facilities, and then pipe it across the state. And for other states, a lot of the rural crowd is very upset at the concerns to their water. This is insanity. We owe the future generations better. We owe other sentient beings, the fish, the birds, the animals that rely on the waterways and the environment that we share this world with, something better. We've had renewable energy and renewable technology for some time. Year after year, it's proving more efficient, more viable. Got one outfit out of Ames, Iowa, Summit Carbon Solutions, and they're proposing to build a pipeline. They have never been in the business of pipelines before. We've seen time and again with other entities such as Energy Transfer, TransCanada, who are well-known pipeline operators, and they have frequently had failures along the line, which spelled environmental disaster and dangerous conditions for the folks that live in the way. We all live downstream. We're part of the Mississippi and Missouri watersheds. There's 16 million people relying on those waterways for their drinking water. We sit atop a huge aquifer, the Ogallala Aquifer. It just doesn't make good sense when there are other better viable alternatives. We're choosing capitalism and profiteering for the few, for the wealthy elite, over the best or the greater good for everyone else, including the future generations of Iowans and others that would be impacted by this project. We've seen for-profit mercenary forces deployed on U.S. soil against American citizens and tribal citizens. These are sovereign nations. They should not be hunted down by mercenaries. These are American citizens. They should not be hunted down by mercenaries, particularly on American soil. We're coming to find here, 5, almost 6 years later, that the permitting for DAPL was illegal. They're still allowing them to operate. Many of the law enforcement entities that were making a lot of the arrests were on the payroll of the pipeline company. That's not the type of society that we want to promote here. We need a more equitable situation. We need more sound solutions to the climate emergency. Perhaps nature is showing us the right way by prairie, for example, with the intricate long 13, 16-foot root systems that can sequester plenty of carbon. A lot of people here are good stewards of the land. People are changing their attitudes, they're changing their beliefs about their farming practices, they're starting to do different stuff, they're starting to do no-till farming, starting to incorporate permaculture and pay attention to indigenous ways of growing crops. And, while certainly it's not on a large scale yet, it's making that transition as more and more people are realizing that we are living amidst a climate emergency. This is chaos. And we're seeing it unfold right before our face. We've had unprecedented flooding. What was that back in 2018, I believe, 2019? Throughout the region. Nebraska was devastated. Iowa was devastated. It's more than just people's livelihoods, but people's actual lives that are being impacted at this point. I'm sorry, Bruce Rastetter. I'm sorry, the folks from Navigator down from Texas and Oklahoma coming here trying to make this your new stomping grounds. I'm sorry for ADM, who wants to build a third pipeline in partnership with Wolf Energy. To a storage facility in Decatur, Illinois. I'm sorry, but our well-being, our livelihoods, our lives, our loved ones, our future generations are simply not worth it to risk for your profiteering motives. 8 months, 12 months ago, nobody was talking about carbon pipelines. Now we're facing a prospect of 3 proposed carbon pipelines here. Terry Branstad, the former governor of Iowa, that famously, infamously switched up 2 of the 3-member board of the IUB in order to get DAPL passed regardless of public opposition. He's on the board. He's a sitting and paid employee on Summit Carbon Solutions. That's ridiculous. He's using his influence. He's sending out mass emails to landowners and rural folks trying to bastardize the Sierra Club as some evil green people that are trying to go against what's good for America and all of that. When in reality, CCS and carbon usage and sequestration is not good for the country. It's not good for our future generations. You heard me say CCS. That's a reference to carbon capture and sequestration or storage, and then there's also carbon capture and usage, CCUS, and the usage is going to go into further extreme fossil fuels exploitation. Something called EOR. They're trying to take more oil out of abandoned and dried up wells. They're trying to go and make the Bakken region go live again. A lot of those wells have gone dry. A lot of those jobs have disappeared over the last few years since Dakota Access was built. And what they're really trying to do is start it up all over again through extreme methodologies, using enhanced oil recovery, or EOR, as an extreme form of fracking, to squeeze out the very last drops out of formations up in the Bakken. They want to storage a lot of this carbon in North Dakota right along the Missouri River. Even have the state of Iowa's Geological Survey weighing in and getting involved in politics and trying to say, well, why aren't we storaging or sequestering carbon here in Iowa? Why aren't we going to store some of it here? Why are we just crisscrossing pipelines when we could store it here? And they were suggesting or submitting that we could store carbon here in Iowa along the Missouri River down in the southwest portion of the state. So that's 2 locations that people are eyeing or targeting to storage carbon: southwest Iowa and central North Dakota along the Missouri River. That's one of this nation's 2 major waterways. Millions and millions of people would be affected if those go brackish or saline. Think of St. Louis, Missouri. Think of Kansas City, Missouri. Think of Omaha, Nebraska, Sioux City. The list goes on and on. Good thing is that we're hopeful. We're well organized. We've got a very lively grassroots opposition amongst landowners themselves. What they're asking everybody to do is to externalize corporate risk to the general public without a sound plan of action, without proper insurance. We don't even really understand CCS technology. In a few of these informational meetings that we've seen, both with Summit and with Navigator, they've said, well, it's CO2, it's in your soda drinks, it's in your fizzy waters, it's not a big deal. They're not talking about the same thing here. This is high pressure, CO2. It will have a violent eruption if the pipe is to fail, and it will blanket the land. It's more of an anhydrous leak, if you imagine that. We've also asked, and we've been very adamant with the Navigator folks, saying, we're not interested in perpetuating the fossil fuels industry. And they're like, oh, but this is a solution. This is, that's part of the greenwashing. They say this is a solution. We're not going to use it for fossil fuels extraction. Well, then we ask them about the enhanced oil recovery, and they say, well, absolutely, we don't want to do enhanced oil recovery. We want to store it because that's when we get the most money from the government. We get the most of the Q45 tax credits and things like that. And then immediately, the gentleman about faced on that comment, he says, however, they would be listed as a common carrier. That's how they're even allowed to use or abuse eminent domain in the first place. And as such, being a common carrier, the gentleman indicated that they could have potentially other customers moving and shuffling carbon around on their pipeline that would be used for EOR. So just the fact that the people who are going to foot the bill for building Navigator, just the fact that they are not planning to use it for EOR because they want to go after the government subsidies and get the most bang for their buck, the highest dollar value by doing sequestration, doesn't mean that they're not going to have other customers sign on board in a year, 2 years. Hell, even by the time the pipeline is fully built and operational, they may have customers that are planning to do enhanced oil recovery and use the carbon for that. We've also had the ADM pipeline that's coming up that was recently announced, a proposed ADM pipeline. They're talking about, getting it connected with ammonia plants. There's talk about blue and green hydrogen. There's any manner of things that can stem off of the CCS. So it's kind of like a domino. If it's built, a whole gate will be open for all kinds of things that are half solutions and false truths, and definitely not what we need as solutions for the climate emergency we're all facing today. We have Indigenous or First Nations people joining up with conservative rural folks, joining up with Greens and environmental liberalists, and we're all saying no CCS, no Kim Reynolds, we don't want this, no Terry Branstad, we don't want this, no Secretary Vilsack's son, also on the Summit board or Summit employees payroll. We don't want this. We don't need this. We can see through your games and your tricks. We can see that there's perverse incentive and monetary motive for all of you involved. What we don't see is why is the state, for example, of Iowa's Geological Survey weighing in and trying to suggest we storage carbon here? This is all a tax credit game. This is how many metric tons of carbon can be stored or shuffled from here to there. There is no incentive for the state, federal or otherwise, to storage that carbon and take on that liability and risk. There was one pipeline built already down in Satartia, Mississippi, and they had a failure in the line. It exploded. It spread high pressure CO2, which plumes out like a cloud. First of all, it's a violent eruption. It's not like weeping or seeping, what we may see with a petroleum line. It's a violent eruption, and then it spreads out, in both directions, and it blankets the ground. And it takes several hours or perhaps even days for it to naturally, mix in with the air and blow out of the area. We're going to have to change something because this is not tenable, this is not sustainable. And if we continue doing this, there won't be an Iowa or much of a country to promote for our future generations. This is not land that people own. This is land that people borrow, and we borrow it from the future. I would say that it's very important for us to get educated. There are several groups of us organizing against this pipeline. There are informational sessions by the company. I encourage everybody to attend those. Ask them the hard questions. Ask them the financial questions. Ask them about the perverse government incentives. Get engaged, get engaged, get engaged. As we saw during the opposition to DAPL, we had a record number of folks take direct action against the project. The whole process is getting rushed. We see that we've got former politicians and government actors and their families that are looking to profit off of this. Rastetter himself, the backer and owner, CEO of Summit, is highly invested in both CAFOs, which have also polluted our waterways here in Iowa, and ethanol. And it's not a stretch of the imagination to see that he's supporting CCS because CCS will be linked with ethanol. By promoting a CCS pipeline, he's basically ensuring a customer base forever after with his ethanol ventures. They fail or lack to see that the ethanol industry is propped up by the government. The fossil fuel industry is propped up by the government, and now the CCS industry could not even be built. The infrastructure will not be able to be built without public dollars, your taxpayer dollars. And we need to be making smart choices with our money. some greenwashed, pie in the sky idea of a CCS pipeline that only serves to prolong fossil fuel usage and further exacerbate climate emergency. It doesn't sound like a sound investment for Iowans, Nebraskans, Minnesotans, South Dakotans, North Dakotans, or any of the tribal nations that may find themselves in the path. Sum it up a lot, I mean, we fight to protect the water and we pledge allegiance to the land. These borders, these governments, they may be here, they may not. Who knows?
Yeah.
I mean, we saw an insurgency at the Capitol roughly a year ago.
Yeah.
Who knows what's going to face us?
Right.
But we do know that we need to have a habitable planet for ourselves, for our families, for future generations, our loved ones, and the other sentient beings that share this environment with us. I don't think that we should just resign ourselves to go quietly into the night. I believe that we should stand up and fight back